Denial is the shock absorber for the soul. It protects us until we are equipped to cope with reality. C.S. Lewis. But denying the truth doesn't change the facts. You can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. And the consequences of this mass denial are dire. It is the collective avoidance and adamant refusal of the people that is responsible for the situation that we find ourselves in. Most remain oblivious to the reality of where exactly we are right now. But all too soon, the world will not be able to hide from the truth any longer. The fact of the matter is that the truth is uncomfortable. It's unsettling and it's mind-blowing. You're left with more questions than answers, and it's very frustrating. But you have to know the truth, and you have to say to yourself, either you're going to do something or you're not. Either you think that it matters or it doesn't. And, I really think it matters, so this is what I'm doing. And unfortunately, the whole world has been so inundated to attack anyone who comes out with this truth as a conspiracy theorist, a tinfoil hat wearer, or whatever. That's what everybody does. So once you have this information, just be prepared to, have to constantly defend yourself. But it's a road worth traveling down. And if we can teach enough people and awaken enough people and, get enough people on the same page, we might be able to change it or save something, at least a little piece of this world. Because right now we're headed for planetary omnicide, which is exactly what it sounds like. Done, over, kaput, everything. No birds, no bees, no trees, no people. Omnicide. Everything gone. And I don't want to go there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's pick up where we left off. In part 1, we went through the birth and infancy of, as it was called then, rainmaking or weather control. So we covered from 1880 to 1960. Just a, very brief, random kind of pick and choose little history there. So let's pick up in the 60s. November 1966, we were given this gem. It's one of my favorite documents. It's from the Federal Council for Science and Technology and Executive Office of the President. In 1966, Lyndon B. Johnson was the president, and he knew all about what was coming in the near future. Listen to this clip from 1962. Listen to what he has to say.
It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world. The foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
A weather satellite? to permit man to determine the world's cloud layer, and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world. Wow, that might be one of the most honest statements a president has ever made. He actually made 3 statements in this speech quite confidently. The first one was satellite TV. He predicted that. The second one was the weather satellite. Predicted that. And the third one was being able to send a man to the moon. So really, what do we think? Do we think he was spot on with 2 out of 3? I don't. I'm pretty sure he got 3 out of 3. So let's take a look at this report. It's one of my favorites, which I think I've already said, but seriously, it's phenomenal. I highly, highly recommend, if you are interested in this at all, to download it and read it for yourself. It's filled with fun stuff. So here she be. A recommended national program in weather modification. This is from November 1966. A report to the Interdepartmental Committee for Atmospheric Sciences by Homer E. Newell, Associate Administrator for Space Science and Applications, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Washington, D.C. Now, this is from 1966, and I know that I'm probably going to spend too much time on this report, you guys, but I mean, there's just so much information here, and I highly, highly recommend that you get this, download it, and read all of it if you're interested at all, because it's just full of information. So right here on page 2 is the different panels and its members. We have the Federal Council for Science and Technology and the Interdepartmental Committee for Atmospheric Sciences. And when you start to go over these, you will realize something. So let's see, we have the Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Department of Health, Education and Welfare, Department of the Interior, Department of Sales, Federal Aviation Agency, Council of Economic Advisors, Atomic Energy Commission, National Science Foundation, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Department of Agriculture, Bureau of the Budget, Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, Smithsonian Institute, National Science Foundation. This second one has like the same ones as the first one, except for this one also has the Office of Federal Coordinator for Meteorological Services and Supporting Research. Some of these people are participants and some are observers, apparently. This one says acting. I don't know. Oh, it's the Acting Atomic Energy Commission. I don't know. So that's like a lot of different agencies and departments and whatnot, and all I can say is I feel like it really pretty much covers the whole of government and institution. All right, so moving right along to page 3 here, we have a memorandum for Donald F. Horing, November 7th, 1966, subject Weather Modification Program. It says, at its meeting of March 29th, 1966, the Federal Council asked ICAS to prepare a report outlining who is doing what in weather modification, the future plans of the agencies, particularly Commerce and Interior, and their interrelationships and the consideration that should affect decisions on division of responsibilities for research in weather modification. Forwarded herewith is the report prepared for ICAS by Dr. Homer E. Newell, the NASA member of ICAS. It has been thoroughly considered by our committee and is endorsed as the ICAS response to the Council's request above. Now, I'm not gonna put you through reading 97 pages of this. I really would love to, honestly, but I don't think anybody would stick around for that. But I highly recommend, if you are a dork like me, that you download this report and read it, every word of it. It's phenomenal. So I'm just going to read some of the highlighted areas here. So, a recommended national program in weather modification. Introduction. The Earth's weather has a profound influence on agriculture, forestry, water resource, industry, commerce, transportation, construction, field operations, commercial fishing, and many other human activities. Adverse effects of the weather on man's activity and the Earth's resources are extremely costly, amounting to billions of dollars per year, sometimes causing irreparable damage as when human lives are lost in severe storms. There is therefore great motivation to develop effective countermeasures against destructive effects of weather, and conversely, to enhance beneficial aspects. The financial and other benefits to human welfare of being able to modify weather to augment water supplies, reduce lightning, suppress hail, mitigate tornadoes, and inhibit the full development of hurricanes would be very great. Over the past 20 years, okay, now this is 1966, remember this. Over the past 20 years, experiments have been conducted on weather modification, particularly on the effects of seeding clouds with such materials as silver iodide crystals. And then I just give it, perhaps the most significant result of the experiments to date has been to bring about a change in attitude from one of skepticism to one of cautious optimism. Okay, so this is from 1966, and they're talking about they've been experimenting for 20 years already at that point. Okay, let's see. The gradual accumulating evidence of positive results from efforts at weather modification led the Committee on Atmospheric Sciences of the National Academy of Science in November 1963 to appoint a panel on weather and climate modification to undertake a deliberate and thoughtful review of the present status and activities in the field and its potential and its limitations for the future. On June 16, 1964, the director of the National Science Foundation announced the appointment of a special commission on weather modification to assist in its review of the field. The commission activated 7 subgroups to study the physical, biological, statistical, social, international, legal, and legislative and administration and funding aspects of weather and climate modification. So, I mean, just in the first 4 pages right here, I feel like this is a government document, you know, like this is, you cannot say conspiracy, you can't. If you're saying this still isn't really like, oh, it's not really a thing, then there's something wrong with you and you've got your head so far, there's nothing that anybody can do to help you. You're afraid to depart from your personal paradigm, and you probably, you know, you deserve whatever happens to you, I guess. I'm sorry. All right. Anyways, a summary report. Present and future plans on federal agencies in weather climate modification, dated June 20th, 1966, was prepared for the Interdepartmental Committee for Atmospheric Sciences, ICAS, by a select panel on weather modification, whereas the ICAS select panel report reflected and described vigor in pressing forward in this important field. Nevertheless, it raised a number of questions as to the soundness and adequacy of proposed plans, the validity of cost estimate, the proposed overlapping research activities, duplication of proposed facilities, responsibility for coordination and reporting, and responsibility for regulations and control. So it just kind of goes on, talks about the approach that they're taking, recommended principles. This one's kind of cool. Let's see. These are all recommended principles. It's very interesting. You really should read it. I wish that there was somebody in the world that wanted me to read this whole thing out loud, because I totally would. The budget, they go over the budget major trust program. Let's see. Department of Agriculture program. So then they kind of go over like independently. So this is from the Department of Agriculture. So I don't know why I highlighted highlighted this. Most of the agricultural budget is to support the above program and includes all necessary facilities. Oh, this is just about the facilities. It was interesting. Such an observational network, operating acquisition of research aircraft, cloud seeding equipment, radar, and special laboratory for lightning studies. These facilities and the increased efforts they support represent, in my opinion, a realistic growth. There is at the present no substantial Department of Agriculture effort in hail suppression. The Department states the Department of Agriculture Research Program in hail suppression is in the embryo stage. The main activity is preliminary planning on long-range research programs. I don't know why I highlighted that, but whatever. I think, I don't know. Anyways, it's just so informative. So then it goes on about the Department of Interior program. The program to date included appropriately cloud seeding efforts, research involving the acquisitions of field data in all experimental areas, and climatology. Interiors program has concentrated on a number of field experiments. Does everybody know what a field experiment is? That's when they're doing it out in the field. In weather states, a program at the University of Wyoming devoted to the study of cap clouds has produced amounts of water which appear to offer promise of economic significance. Interiors-based programs ranges from theoretical studies of cloud physics to actual modification operations, and include the development of instruments and data acquisition systems. The Southern Sierra program has studied the effectiveness of cloud seeding in that specialized area. The Pacific Northwest program has included experiments on shifting precipitation from areas of surplus to areas of deficit. Okay, so again, this is stating unequivocally that these experiments are taking place, and this is in 1966, mind you. They're absolutely happening, or they were happening then, and at this point, we're beyond the experimental phase. I'm sure they're still doing experiments, but the majority of what you see is a fine science. They know exactly what they're doing, who, what, when, where, why, and how. They've got it fine-tuned unbelievably. So then this is just more stuff here. This is really about the budget mostly. Laboratory studies. Atmospheric chemistry. This project, these are all the different projects. This project is geared to the application of chemical analysis methods to atmospheric physics. It is intended to measure, record, analyze the chemical constituents of clouds, rain, and other precipitation. Ion conductivity, pH value, ion identity are some of the parameters which will be recorded at mountain stations as well as on aircraft. This is when they started testing different chemicals in the sky. Okay, let's see, I know there's more here. It's so gives you such a, it's a window into what they were doing and what they know, what they've researched. So cloud dynamics, ice formation in clouds, coalescence, cloud electrification, computer analysis, capital facilities. This says that all the different departments are going to share facilities, and if they need to build a new one, it's going to be shared too. Coordination and reporting. As indicated by the present, early planning, research, and applications of weather modification are broad and varied in scope and have the interest of many agencies. Even at this stage of coordination, it is imperative, and with the passage of time, coordination will become even more important to sound planning and effective execution of the program. It is clear that research and application of weather modification are closely related to meteorological services and supporting research. Indeed, it would be an artificially to attempt to separate them. Hence, I recommend that the federal coordinator, who already has responsibility for coordination and reporting in this area of meteorology, take coordination of national weather modification programs in addition to the coordination of national activities in meteorology. By coordination, I mean largely correlation, including documenting and tabulating in one's place. Anyway, it says that you should do an annual report, regulation and control. The regulation and control, he goes over several times, and he said, I feel very strongly that the regulating body must not be one of the operating agencies participating in the National Weather Modification Program, which obviously that's the whole fox guarding the hen house thing, right? Right. So this is one of the most telling things, I think. I lost it. Dang it. Nope. Was that it? Okay, yeah. Sorry, guys. Okay, so international implications. Now, one of the things that I hear the very most is, there's no way that this is happening because there's no way that, it could just stay in our country. Well, of course not. The clouds, whatever. Anyways, international implications. By approximately 1972, when large-scale weather modification experiments may well be operational, they may be expected to have considerable international impact. This impact will be twofold. One, as experiments and operations become geographically more extensive, there will be a need for coordinating such operations with nations whose territories are affected by those operations. If experiments take place over oceans, there may be a conflict with weather modification experiments by other nations. This is essentially a question of regulation and coordination. It is not expected that an international regulatory body will exist by that time. Indeed, efforts to establish an international agency to deal with weather modification, while intended, are likely to be of dubious value and to create rather than resolve political problems. If the experience in nuclear energy and space is any guide. A more practical and constructive approach to the international problem, and one which should pave rather than block the way for necessary experimentation, would be through bilateral or multilateral arrangements. In these, the U.S. would seek to establish the mutual interest of neighboring countries in large-scale experiments and to engage with them in such experiments. In this way, we could educate a growing number of countries, establish our good faith, increase the acceptability of the program and the eyes of third countries, demonstrate value transcending national interests, and win support where required in international forums, which may address themselves on a political basis to the problems of weather modification. The Office for Regulation and Control, discussed in the preceding section, will certainly have to be involved. National responsibilities will have to be clarified and defined. This, however, is a subject outside the scope of my assignment. 2. Benefits and potential payoffs of weather modification experiments on a national scale have already been discussed in the introduction of this report. When applied on a global scale, these benefits could increase greatly. For example, modification and diversion of tropical storms or typhoons in the Western Pacific or the Indian Oceans would result not only in the prevention of property damage several orders of magnitude greater than in North America, but also, and more importantly, in the savings of countless numbers of human lives. Similar benefits would occur from precipitation augmentation by relieving large areas from the effects of extensive droughts. Thus, valuable experience gained initially on smaller national scale may eventually be important internationally, permitting us to cooperate with and assist other countries in the saving of human lives and property, and in the enhancement of human welfare. This is another of the benefits that may result from vigorous national programs such as that discussed in the preceding sections. Okay, so, that's that. So let's see. It is believed that the plan I recommended herein would permit the development of a national weather modification program. So the next portion of this report on page 46 is from the panel on weather and climate modification to the Committee on Atmospheric Sciences. These are the people that they recommended to be a part of the committee. So let's see, areas and recommendations. It's funny, we recommend an immediate and thorough study of the administration and support of research and development in weather modification. We recommend that immediate steps be taken by the agencies to raise the support from the 1965 level of 5 million to at least 30 million by 1970. So in 5 years, they want to go from 5 million to 30 million. So that gives you an idea of the scope of development of, weather modification programs. Projects in stimulation of precipitation, research properties. Let's see. We recommend that planning be started immediately on all of the following major field investigations: comprehensive exploration of hurricanes, measurement of tropical convection and other aspects of energy exchange process, investigation of hailstorms, measure the dynamics of water budgets. I don't know what the heck. It is clear that research throughout the atmospheric sciences will contribute to the goals of weather and climate modification, blah, blah, blah. So, So then this one, this is page 51, is from the Special Commission on Weather Modification, National Science Foundation. These are, again, who they recommend for their membership. And then progress and prospects in weather and climate modification. The Commission concludes that sound progress toward the technology of weather and climate modification must be based on 4 fundamental pursuits: assessment and development and understanding of natural climate change, assessment of extent and development of understanding inadvertent modification of weather and climate, improvement of process of weather prediction as a social benefit and as proof of scientific understanding of atmospheric behavior, development of means for deliberate intervention in atmospheric process for weather and climate control. Steps towards these attainments, the Commission recommends that the following enterprise be fostered. Let's see, biological aspects of weather modification. Living things are adapted to the weather that actually prevails, and any change in that weather will be generally deleterious to them. The largest credit item for weather modification is likely to be an increase in primary production of the drier parts of land surface through improvements in rainfall. Even the ability to control seasonal distribution of rainfall would lead to more efficient farming operations. Realization of potential increase in production would depend upon being able to modify the rainfall without major pest outbreaks and extinction and disruption of natural communities. It is not certain that this would be possible. So they're saying they don't know if it's possible to modify the weather without destroying the natural, world. The largest weather modification debt item is likely to spring from the decreased stability of communities, which would manifest itself in an increase in pests, weeds, and pathogens. The identity of the species involved in those disruptions cannot be predicted, nor can their cost. For the present, weather and climate modification should be restricted to local small-scale operations. Large-scale operations, such as an attempt to increase the rainfall of any substantial part of this country, should not be undertaken from a biological point of view in the present state of knowledge. All weather modification experiments of a scale large enough to have an important biological consequences, such as those currently envisioned for the Upper Colorado Basin, should be preceded and accompanied by careful ecological monitoring and computer simulation studies. Manipulating the weather to obtain a net benefit will demand much better understanding of the interactions of weather, climate, and organisms than now are available. Adequate understanding of the interrelationship of weather, climate, and ecology will demand very expensive long-term research programs. Present resources of ecologically trained investigators are inadequate to cope with these problems. The working group of the Ecological Society of America, which provided background material for the commission, was concerned primarily with modifications of weather systems training from a single cloud to an extratropical cyclone storm. The working group that stated short-term modification of weather of the magnitude of similar to the fluctuations in nature are least likely to have dangerous unforeseen consequences. If undesirable results appear, the modification can be discontinued. Repeat operations on the scale mentioned are likely, however, to have far-reaching biological consequences, as pointed out in the previous sections, and some of the biological changes would not be reversible. This advisory group recommends that repeated long-term modification of weather not be attempted without prior careful, well-planned monitoring or computer simulation studies of the biological consequences of particular kinds of weather modification. And I think probably what happened is, the same thing that happens in the movies. Like one guy comes forward, one good guy, and is like, don't do this. Free will, please don't do this. This is all bad. And then the military's like, screw you, we're doing it anyway. Anyway, a program of carefully planned precipitation-oriented field experiments should be carried out under the complete control of scientists, embodying the required technical knowledge, processing continuity over a period needed for conclusiveness on sufficient scale to permit geographic conclusions, as well as statistical stratification according to the type of seeding agent, mode of injection, cloud type, etc. The human effects of weather and climate modification.
You are a slave.
Steps should be taken to assure that whatever field experimentation or commercial operations are undertaken in weather and climate modification, arrangements be made to study the social consequences. A special panel should be established to exchange and give critical review to the results of such studies. The method of assessing impacts of weather modification should be the subject of research looking into its refinement and extension. Freedom of field experiments should be supported by providing indemnification of federally financed experiments against damage claims. Research should be encouraged on the basic relationship between weather characteristics and human activity. decision-making process in the face of uncertainty as to weather modification and its effects should be subject to careful investigation as a means of increasing the government's ability to predict the results of alternative policies and methods for weather modification. Interdisciplinary study of modification, which man makes inadvertently, should be encouraged. All right. Then we have legal and legislative aspects. The Commission recommends that the federal government, by appropriate legislation, be empowered to 1. Delay or halt all activities, public or private, in actual or potential conflict with weather and climate modification programs of the federal government, whether carried on by the government itself or by its grantees or contractors. 2. Immunize federal agents, grantees, and contractors engaged in weather and climate modification activities from state and local government interference. And 3. Provide to the federal grantees and contractors indemnification or other protection against liability to the public for damages caused by federal programs of weather and climate modification. Wow. So they have immunity. Weather modification and international relations. The Commission believes that it would be highly desirable for the government of the United States, in connection with the expansion of its programs of weather and climate modification, to issue a basic statement as to how it views the relationship of this new national effort to the interests, hopes, and possible apprehensions of the rest of the world. The Commission further believes that emphasis upon international cooperation in the development of weather and climate modification programs will contribute substantially to scientific and technical progress and will also serve the national purpose of seeking to build a peaceful world order. The Commission recommends to the early indication of national policy embodying 2 main points. 1, that its purpose of the United States, with normal and due regard to its own basic interests, to pursue its efforts in weather and climate modification for peaceful ends and for the constructive improvement of the conditions of human life throughout the world. And 2, that the United States, recognizing the interests and concerns of other countries, welcomes and solicits their cooperation directly and through international arrangements for the achievement of that objective. This cooperation should cover both research and operational programs of interest to other countries. It should be concerned not only with deliberate but also inadvertent human interventions in atmosphere that affect weather and climate. Such policy declaration could be issued by the President or incorporated in any basic legislation on the subject of weather and climate modification, which Congress may enact. Okay, so we went ahead and jumped to page 64, which is present and future plans of federal agencies in weather climate modification. This is from June 20th, 1966. So this just amazed me. So in the category of precipitation modification in 1967, it planned to take 4.7 million out of 9.33 million total budget. 1970, okay, 3 years later, 99.6 million out of 146.83 million total budget for precipitation modification. Then let's see the largest percentage and overall increase from 1967 to 1970 in weather modification are planned by ESSA and the Bureau of Reclamation. ESSA 1.55 million in 1967 to 59.7 million in 1970. Bureau of Reclamation 3 million in 1967 to 70 million in 1970. Holy smokes, dude. 3 million to 70 million. What in the world is the Bureau of Reclamation doing? Wow. Anyways, the Department of Agriculture is planning to support reasonably broad-based weather modification program, increase from 0.5 million to 9.35 million. And then check this out. So here's, let's see if I can make it small. Just a breakdown of the budget and the different things that they're doing. We got fog and cloud dissipation, precipitation modification, hail suppression, lightning modification, severe storm modification, other climate boundary layer, etc., socioeconomic, biological, legal, inadvertent modification. Did that one. Field experiments, laboratory studies, statistical studies, theoretical research, development of technology, systems development, other legal, social, biological, etc. Cloud chambers, aircraft purchase, rental, instrumentation, aircraft operating costs, observational networks, radar for weather modification, laboratory equipment, cloud seeding equipment, computers for weather modification, purchase or rental, and other. So yeah, that's their actual budget. The report continues. The Department of Agriculture is performing or planning weather modification research in 5 major areas. So they're already performing or planning on doing weather modification in 5 major areas. 1, lightning suppression. 2, hail suppression. 3, biological response to weather modification. 4, boundary layer energy exchange. 5, remote sensing in support of weather modification. Present programs. So these are programs that are already taking place. Lightning suppression. Project Skyfire of the U.S. Forest Service is performing an active research program aimed at suppression of lightning. Field experiments are testing the effects of very heavy seeding with silver iodide on lightning storms. The results to date show seeded clouds produce 1/3 fewer ground strokes than non-seeded clouds. The type of lightning discharge most likely to emit forest fires has also been identified. Physical and mathematical models of mountain thunderstorms are being developed. Hail suppression. The main activity is preliminary planning of long-range research programs, biological response to weather modification. The Forest Service and Agricultural Research Service are engaged in biological studies, giving consideration to individual species under a limited range of climate parameters. These studies are developing information on both forest and farm biological communities in relation to specific features of weather and climate. Boundary layer energy exchange. The Department of Agriculture has had a long and productive research relationship related to boundary layer energy exchange. These studies concern the energy response of evapotranspiration. Limited studies are underway of energy exchange relationships under specific atmospheric situations. Remote sensing in support of weather modification. The Forest Service and Agricultural Research Services are performing research for development of knowledge and technology in remote sensing as applied to agricultural and forestry programs. Part of the activities support development of the Weather Modification Research Program. Airborne infrared scanners are being used to provide information on fires, vegetation, topographic features, and background thermal radiation. Advanced photographic techniques are being developed. Planning is underway for an expanded research program for remote sensing of biomass changes on agricultural and forest lands and detection of critical changes in boundary layer energy exchange relations. Biological responses. The research program proposed would provide a centrally coordinated effort directed at meeting the glaring deficiencies in ecological knowledge. In an area in which weather is to be modified, natural communities would be selected for study and permanent plots established in them. Committees would be chosen to represent a full range of environments and a major community types in the area, as especially in extreme environments. Detailed observations would be made before, during, and after the period. So we have the Bureau of Reclamation's Weather Modification Program. Field experiments will continue to be the area of greatest effort, and it is anticipated that research activities will have expanded to include the entire nation. It is expected that some areas, perhaps one in the east and one in the west, will have pilot plant operational programs. Among the major investigations will be continued studies for the feasibility of redistributing precipitation as part of total water resource development of the nation. Most of the field experiments will be continued at higher levels of effort. However, a few may be terminated as answers to specific problems are found. It is anticipated that major steps forward will be taken in ground-to-ground and air-to-ground telemetry operations, and also establishing a nationwide weather radar surveillance network to aid in detecting seeding opportunities and evaluating results. Wherever possible, commercial operators are being encouraged to incorporate research aspects into their commercially sponsored seeding projects. Recent contracts with Wallace E. Howell Associates to scientifically evaluate the salt seeding of warm clouds over the Virgin Islands, with Atmospherics Inc. to evaluate the effectiveness of their seeding program in the Kings River drainage basin in California are examples of this effort. The initiation of interest in weather modification in universities where competence may grow is also a goal of the National Science Foundation program. The growing interest in social, economic, legal, biological, and ecological impacts of weather modification created by the recent report of the National Science Foundation Special Commission on Weather Modification is being fostered by the formation of the Task Group on Human Dimensions for Weather Modification at the University of Missouri to study the socio-economic impact of weather and climate modification. This is a field of research which will receive increasing emphasis by the National Science Foundation in the future. All right, so it just goes on. National Science Foundation program. Let's see. NASA's program. It'll be primarily a continuation of the effort being supported under contract with Cornell Aeronautical Laboratories on the investigation of warm fog properties. So it's gonna keep going. It's not gonna start. It's already been going. So yeah, it just keeps going here. The FAA has an interest in all aspects of weather modification. And let's see. At its 64th meeting on June 20th, 1966, the ICAS agreed to proceed with the development of a national weather modification program along the lines delineated in the report of its select panel on weather modification of the same date. You are requested to formulate this program with such assistance as you may request from any or all ICAS members. Anyway, so this just says that they're ready to implement the program. It's the chronology of meetings in the minutes here. Yeah, it's pretty very cool. See an outline of proposed 5-year plan in weather modification, U.S. Department of Commerce. Schedule, summary papers, report on special commissions. I mean, I don't know what else you could want, really. There's some pictures. So if you're still watching this video thank you so much. We should be friends, like in real life. You should definitely leave a comment and just say we should be friends. And I will hit you up and give you my personal information, and we can actually be friends. Because I know I'm probably the most boring human being in the world, and you know what? That's only one report. One. I have dozens, hundreds probably, and that's just one report. And I really am going to do more, because somehow I know that that's not going to be enough to convince people that are unconvinced. Even though I'm not trying to convince anybody actually of anything. I just want people to look into it for themselves, and I don't have to convince anybody. It is what it is. It is the truth, and it's hard. I know it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow, or however that saying goes, but I don't know. Anyways, if you're still here, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on and on, and please leave me a comment, and I will give you my information, and we can be friends and talk and try and save the world together. All right, have a great day.